the spring of 1868, the shogun lost control of Japan. But inside Edo Castle, another world was collapsing. Behind layers of walls, gates, screens, and guarded corridors lived the women of Ooku, the private quarters of the Tokugawa shogun. Some were wives. Some were concubines. Some were daughters of powerful families. Most were servants who had spent years learning the palace rules. They had lived almost entirely apart from the outside world. They knew which corridor they were allowed to enter, which fabric they could wear, which woman they had to bow to, which words were safe to speak. Then the shogunate ended. The gates opened, the guards disappeared, and the women of Ooku were suddenly forced to leave the only world many of them had ever known. This is the story of the hidden women behind Japan's shogun, and what happened when their palace vanished. To understand Ooku, we have to begin with Edo Castle. Today, Tokyo is one of the largest cities on Earth, but during the Edo period, it was the center of the Tokugawa shogunate, a military government that ruled Japan for more than 250 years. The emperor remained in Kyoto, but real political power belonged to the shogun in Edo. Edo Castle was not simply a residence. It was a fortress, government center, ceremonial stage, and royal household all at once. The castle was divided into different zones. The public areas were where officials met, documents were signed, and political decisions were made. The private sections were reserved for the shogun and his family. And deep inside was Ooku, the inner palace. It was a world largely run by women, for women, and around the private life of the shogun. Calling it only a harem misses the point. Ooku was also a household administration, a social hierarchy, a place of education, ritual, service, and political influence. It contained the shogun's official wife, possible concubines, female relatives, senior attendants, junior servants, cooks, seamstresses, cleaners, messengers, and countless other workers. The exact population changed over time, but at its largest, Ooku was not a small household. It was an institution. Every person inside it had a rank, and every rank came with rules. Very few women entered Ooku by accident. Many came from samurai families. Others were connected to powerful noble houses. Some were selected because they had the education, appearance, manners, or family background expected inside the shogun's household. For a family, sending a daughter into Ooku could be a great honor. It could also be a political opportunity. A woman who gained the trust of a senior lady might help her family receive influence, protection, or access to the shogun's household. But the honor came with a price. Once inside, a woman's personal identity became less important than her position. Her clothing showed her rank. Her hairstyle showed her status. Her speech had to follow strict forms of politeness. She could not simply walk wherever she wanted. She could not speak casually to everyone. She could not treat the shogun's family as ordinary relatives. Even small mistakes could damage her reputation. A wrong bow, a careless word, a forbidden meeting, a message delivered to the wrong person. Inside Ooku, privacy was almost impossible. A woman could be surrounded by hundreds of others and still be completely isolated, because the palace was not designed to give women freedom. It was designed to protect the Tokugawa family. What did an ordinary day inside Ooku feel like? The surviving records do not give us a perfect timetable for every woman, but they reveal a world built around repetition, preparation, ceremony, and waiting. The day began with appearance. Clothing had to be prepared carefully. A senior woman might have several layers of silk, arranged according to season, rank, and occasion. Colors mattered. Patterns mattered. The way a sleeve appeared beneath another sleeve could communicate status. For the women serving the shogun's household, dressing was not simply personal grooming. It was part of palace discipline. Then came work. Some women prepared food, some cleaned rooms, some repaired clothing, some carried messages, some waited outside important chambers. Others assisted senior women with bathing, hair, makeup, and formal clothing. The higher a woman's rank, the less physical labor she performed. But high rank did not always mean freedom. A senior lady might control access to an important chamber, but she was also responsible for maintaining order among everyone beneath her. One mistake could reflect on the entire chain of command. Much of Ooku's life was invisible from the outside. The palace was divided by screens and curtains. Women were expected to understand where they could stand, where they could sit, and when they were permitted to appear. Even movement became a language. A woman's position in a room could tell everyone else exactly how important she was. And when the shogun moved through the inner palace, the atmosphere changed. Preparations began. Rooms were arranged. Attendants took their positions. Messages traveled through layers of women. The shogun might be the most powerful man in Japan, but inside Ooku, access to him was controlled by a female hierarchy. That is where the real influence of the palace began. The shogun did not interact with every woman in Ooku directly. Information reached him through attendants. Requests passed through intermediaries. Appointments, complaints, gifts, and messages all moved through a carefully controlled system. This gave senior women considerable influence. A senior attendant might decide who was allowed to approach an important person. She could control how a message was presented. She could protect one woman and isolate another. She could help maintain peace inside the palace or become the center of a faction. The shogun's official wife also held an important position. She was not simply a romantic figure. She represented the dignity of the Tokugawa household. She supervised ceremonies. She managed relationships inside the palace. And when the shogun had no heir, the question of succession became a crisis for everyone. The birth of a son could change the future of the entire country. A woman who gave birth to a potential heir could gain enormous status. But she could also become the target of jealousy, pressure, and political competition. This is one of the strangest realities of Ooku. The women were separated from formal government, but their private lives were connected directly to the future of Japan. A pregnancy was not merely a family event. It could decide who would become shogun and who would control the country after him. If you enjoy historical stories about what life was actually like behind the official records, subscribe to Timoria, because the people who appear in the margins of history often reveal more about a society than its rulers do. Now, inside Ooku, the most important rules were often the ones nobody wrote down. The women of Ooku lived with privilege. They had food, clothing, shelter, and access to a powerful household. But privilege did not mean freedom. Their lives were controlled by the palace. Leaving was difficult. Contact with the outside world was restricted. Information had to pass through official channels, and relationships were watched carefully. For many women, Ooku was also a permanent separation from family. A daughter might enter as a teenager and spend years away from her parents. A servant might build her entire identity around palace life. A woman could gain a higher position inside the institution, yet become less connected to ordinary life outside. The palace protected its secrets aggressively. Women who worked inside were expected to maintain confidentiality. The private life of the shogun could not become public gossip. The conduct of the women could not embarrass the Tokugawa family, and the palace could not appear weak. This created a strange contradiction. Ooku was run by women. Women managed its daily life. Women enforced its rituals. Women controlled access and communication. But the institution ultimately existed to preserve a male political dynasty. Their work sustained the shogun's household. Their silence protected his authority. Their bodies, marriages, pregnancies, and movements were all connected to the survival of the Tokugawa line. They had influence, but they did not control the system that gave them that influence. Some women of Ooku became famous. Many others disappeared from the historical record. One of the most important figures was Atsuhime, later known as Tensho-in. She entered the Tokugawa family through a political marriage and became the wife of the 13th shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Her position was complicated. She came from a powerful samurai background. She carried the expectations of her birth family. But once she entered Ooku, she also became part of the Tokugawa household. She had to navigate rival interests, palace traditions, and the question of succession. Later came Kazunomiya, a princess from the imperial family in Kyoto who married the 14th shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Her marriage was intended to strengthen the relationship between the imperial court and the shogunate. But the political world around her was becoming unstable. Japan was under pressure from foreign powers. Opposition to the shogunate was growing, and the old balance between Kyoto and Edo was beginning to break. These women were not simply observers. They were placed at the center of a political crisis, but their personal choices were limited by the institutions surrounding them. They could negotiate, they could advise, they could protect people within their household, yet they could not stop the forces gathering outside the palace walls. Soon the walls would no longer be enough. In 1867, the last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, returned political authority to the emperor. The shogunate had ruled Japan for generations. Now it was losing control. In 1868, civil conflict spread across the country. Imperial forces moved toward Edo. The possibility of a major battle inside the city became real. But Edo Castle was eventually surrendered without the destruction that many feared. For the people of Ooku, this was the end of their world. The system that had supported their lives no longer existed. The shogun's household was dismantled. Women who had held prestigious positions became refugees from their own status. Some returned to their families. Some moved into religious life. Some continued living with members of the former Tokugawa household. Others left behind few records at all. Imagine that transition. One day, your entire life is organized by rank and ritual. You know every room you are allowed to enter. You know every person you must obey. You know the ceremonies, the clothing, the schedule, and the expectations. Then the government collapses. Your uniform no longer represents authority. Your title no longer carries the same meaning. The palace that defined your identity is suddenly closed. The outside world may call it liberation, but for many women, it must also have felt like exile. They were leaving a prison, but it was the only home they knew. The Tokugawa shogunate is remembered through its rulers, the battles, the policies, the samurai, the famous names. But behind every shogun was another world, a world of women who prepared his meals, protected his privacy, managed his household, raised his children, carried his messages, and preserved the rituals of the dynasty. The women of Ooku were not powerless. They created systems, built alliances, controlled information, and maintained an institution that lasted for centuries. But their power existed inside strict boundaries. They were allowed influence, but not independence. They were granted status, but not freedom. They were surrounded by people, but separated from the world. And when the shogunate disappeared, the palace disappeared with it. Today, Ooku is often remembered as a place of mystery, romance, and secret affairs. But the reality was more complicated. It was a workplace, a political household, a protected prison, and a society built almost entirely around preserving one family's power. For centuries, the women inside it lived behind screens. They were close to the center of Japan's political world, yet rarely allowed to speak in their own names. The shoguns left monuments. The women left fragments. A letter, A diary, a name in a household record, a story passed down through someone else's memory. And sometimes that is all history allows us to recover. The palace is gone, the walls have fallen silent, but the women of Ooku were there. They lived behind Japan's shogun, and now, at last, their story can be seen. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden world of Ooku, subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten realities of history. And let me know in the comments, would you have preferred the security of Ooku's walls, or the uncertainty of life outside them? As always, we'll see you in the past.